Defending Society Against Science. The Bold Ideas of Paul Feyerabend. Imagine a world where questioning the authority of science is not just allowed but encouraged, where the claim that science holds a monopoly over truth is challenged, and where multiple paths to knowledge coexist. This world was envisioned by Paul Feyerabend, one of the most controversial philosophers of the 20th century. But why did Feyerabend feel the need to defend society against the overwhelming dominance of science? Let's dive into his intriguing ideas and understand why he believed that science, as we know it, shouldn't be the ultimate authority in our lives. Who was Paul Feyerabend? Born in 1924 in Vienna, Austria, Paul Feyerabend emerged as one of the most unconventional thinkers in the philosophy of science. As a young man, he experienced the turmoil of World War II, which led to his skepticism about authoritarian systems. He was no stranger to questioning established norms, and this skepticism fueled his later criticism of science. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who saw science as the beacon of progress, Feyerabend viewed it with suspicion. He felt that science had become another form of dogma, just like the religious doctrines it once sought to replace. The myth of the scientific method. One of Feyerabend's most controversial claims was that there is no such thing as a universal scientific method. To him, the idea that science follows a strict, objective, and rational procedure was nothing more than a myth. In his famous book, Against Method, Feyerabend argued that history shows us countless examples where scientific progress didn't follow any single method. For instance, consider the revolutionary shift from Newtonian physics to Einstein's theory of relativity. This wasn't a simple process of following a set of rules, but a complex, chaotic, and unpredictable journey that involved creativity, intuition, and even elements of chance. According to Feyerabend, if scientists rigidly adhered to one method, such breakthroughs would never occur. Therefore, he argued that the idea of a strict scientific method was not only misleading but also restrictive. Science versus other forms of knowledge. Feyerabend was a staunch advocate of pluralism, the belief that there are many ways to acquire knowledge and understand the world. He was deeply concerned that the dominance of science in Western society was marginalizing other forms of knowledge, be it art, religion, or traditional wisdom. He often pointed out how indigenous cultures, with their rich histories and unique understandings of nature, were being dismissed as primitive, simply because their knowledge didn't fit into the scientific framework. Take, for example, the traditional medicinal practices of Native American tribes or African herbal medicine. These methods have been used effectively for centuries, yet they are often labeled as unscientific by modern standards. Feyerabend would argue that such knowledge is equally valuable, and that dismissing it in favor of scientific knowledge is a form of cultural imperialism. Science as an ideology, a new religion? In his critique, Feyerabend went as far as to claim that science had become a modern religion. Just as medieval societies adhered to the teachings of the Church without question, modern societies have placed an almost blind faith in science. He highlighted how scientific institutions have amassed immense power, often influencing political decisions, education, and even moral judgments. One fascinating example is the way scientific experts were treated during the pandemic. Governments worldwide relied heavily on scientists to guide policies, sometimes leading to drastic measures that were accepted without question by the public. Feyerabend would argue that this unquestioning reliance on science is dangerous because it overlooks the complexities of real-world problems and ignores the insights that other fields might offer. The dangers of scientific monoculture. Feyerabend believed that when society treats science as the ultimate authority, it risks becoming a monoculture, a society where one way of thinking dominates all others. This is akin to a garden where only one type of plant is allowed to grow, eventually leading to a lack of diversity and resilience. He warned that such a monoculture could stifle creativity, limit human potential, and suppress alternative ways of understanding the world. For instance, Consider how the dominance of Western medicine has often overshadowed traditional healing practices in various cultures. While scientific medicine has its strengths, dismissing other healing methods means losing out on centuries of knowledge and experience. By defending society against the dominance of science, Feyerabend was advocating for a richer, more diverse intellectual landscape. The role of freedom in knowledge creation. Feyerabend passionately believed in intellectual freedom. He argued that progress is only possible when people are free to explore different ideas, even if they contradict established scientific theories. He famously declared, "Anything goes," suggesting that in the quest for knowledge, all ideas should be considered, no matter how unconventional they might seem. He drew inspiration from historical examples like Galileo, who faced fierce opposition from the scientific and religious authorities of his time. Galileo's revolutionary ideas about the solar system would never have gained ground if he had been forced to adhere strictly to the prevailing scientific method. Feyerabend used such examples to illustrate that true progress often occurs when people dare to challenge the status quo. Criticisms and misunderstandings of Feyerabend's ideas. It's essential to note that Feyerabend was often misunderstood. Many critics accused him of being an enemy of science or promoting irrationality. However, Feyerabend didn't oppose science itself. He opposed the idea that science was the only valid way to understand the world. He wasn't advocating for chaos or the rejection of scientific knowledge. Instead, he was urging society to recognize that there are many paths to truth, and that science should be one option among many. He believed that when science is open to dialogue with other forms of knowledge, it becomes richer and more adaptable. Rather than diminishing science, this approach could enhance its ability to address the complex, multifaceted challenges of the world. Feyerabend's legacy. What can we learn today? Today, Feyerabend's ideas are more relevant than ever. As we face global challenges like climate change, pandemics, and social inequality, it's clear that no single discipline has all the answers. By embracing Feyerabend's pluralistic vision, we can foster a society where different forms of knowledge coexist, enrich one another, and contribute to a more holistic understanding of the world. We can learn from indigenous practices to tackle environmental issues, use artistic insights to understand human behavior, or draw on philosophical traditions to question the ethical implications of new technologies. In a world where science often dominates public discourse, Feyerabend reminds us that there's wisdom to be found in unexpected places. Paul Feyerabend's defense of society against the dominance of science is not a call to reject science, but an invitation to question its authority and embrace a more inclusive, pluralistic approach to knowledge. By challenging the idea that science is the sole path to truth, Feyerabend opened the door to a world where different ways of knowing can coexist, complement, and enrich each other. So, as we continue to explore the mysteries of the universe, let's remember Feyerabend's message, that the journey to knowledge is not a one-way street but a vast, interconnected web with countless paths leading us to new and exciting discoveries.